Welcome back to K-Nation. It has been a heck of a year for K-State sports, and we've been tracking it all. And as we've been doing that, so have the folks at GoPowercat.
Of course they have, and one of their staffers, Cole Carmody, joins us here in studio. Cole, thanks for the time.
Hey, thanks guys for having me on. I appreciate
Absolutely, yeah. Let's start with a question revolving around your podcast. You got the podcast Fighting Ever Fighting. Check it out on Spotify, Apple Music. You just had Will Howard on, right? Was that last week you had him on?
Yep.
Tell me about your conversation with him. We don't want to spoil the whole podcast, but what were your takeaways from talking with him?
Well, I think, first of all, Will Howard is an amazing, not only quarterback, but just an amazing kid. Me being 24, I just celebrated my 24th birthday. I don't always feel like I'm very old. But then when I talk to these athletes, and I'm like, okay, yeah, I'm getting up there in age.
A big difference.
He's a great kid. He talked a lot about his struggles that he went through his freshman season. And if folks remember that 2020 COVID year, I mean, that was rough for a lot of people, but especially for Will as a true freshman, having no experience in college. It was really hard for him. He reflected on that and really talked about what the journey he has gone on, and it's been awesome. Again, I'm pretty selfish, and I know that I say go check out my things a lot, especially a lot of the stuff we do, but that was probably my favorite podcast I've done.
Okay, well, it is nice to open up about, non-related sports stuff with the sports guys. But if we can dive into the actual sports, though, receivers for K-State, who Will Howard's going to throw to. Got Keegan Johnson coming in, Phillip Brooks returns, RJ Garcia. What have you seen from the springtime from the pass catchers for the Wildcats?
And it's a great question because Will talked about that in the podcast. So I think for me, we didn't get a ton of access to the spring. So the spring things they had, obviously K-State did not have a spring football game this year, which I think a lot of people were a little frustrated about. That's just not kind of what Chris Kleiman does. But I think the receivers, I'm really excited for Keegan Johnson. You touched on him, the transfer from Iowa. He is electric, and he will be the guy that looks to replace Malik Knowles. Don't sleep on Phillip Brooks coming back either. That's another big addition for this offense. He was kind of that glue guy last year. I look for him to maybe take a bigger role, and you talked about RJ Garcia. He can be another one of those outside receivers. But between Phillip Brooks and Keegan Johnson, there's going to be no shortage of weapons for Will Howard. That's for sure.
Yeah, that's for sure. And they got Ben Sinnott. You'll throw the ball to him a lot too. We know those guys are pretty tight. He likes to get him the football. I want to talk about recruiting. You guys track recruiting very closely across 24/7 as a whole, but especially you guys. As we talk about recruiting, have you seen a jolt in the recruiting from football and basketball? You win a Big 12 title, you go to the Elite Eight, you're probably going to get some recruits that notice that, right?
Oh, yeah. I think that the recruiting uptick for K-State is extremely noticeable. I think for winning the Big 12 championship for football, that impact really won't be made until this year or potentially even on the next year's class of 2025, just because those roots are so deep. They're established when they're sophomores, sometimes even freshmen in high school. So really the success of the last year's team, you'll see with the kids who are sophomores in high school now, which is kind of counterintuitive when you really think about it. But just based off the type of athletes that they're going after, you can tell that things are really changing at K-State, and success is having a major impact on it.
So we got good guys coming in for basketball, some top recruits. But last year for basketball, there were really no expectations. A whole new team besides two guys. Coach Tang comes in, and with that, it was super exciting. But now we know Coach Tang is a great coach. What are expectations like coming into a next season?
Well, I still think they're looking to fill out a team, first of all. I mean, they still have 2 or 3 scholarships left. I think there's a lot of K-State fans that are holding out hope that Keontae Johnson returns. I believe the deadline for him would be May 31st. He did not enter his name into the transfer portal. He's just in the draft process. So that means he can still technically come back if he would like to, if he does not receive the feedback he likes. But there's still some spots open, and we saw that they didn't fill those spots until the end of the summer last year. So I would caution people to be overly up in arms about them not having the roster filled. KU's going through the same thing, trying to fill all those roster spots. But, yeah, I think that the expectations are extremely high, and Coach Tang's talked about it. He's trying to build K-State into a blue blood.
Yeah, which is awesome. We heard Coach Tang talk about it, and he kind of gained some trust last year. I think we got to June, July last year, and we're like, Coach, you got 4 players. You got to have 5 to have some starters.
But Keontae was a late add, too.
He was, and so he gained some trust there. He talked about it when the offseason began that, it's not always about finding the first players in the transfer portal, but the best players and the guys that fit the program the best. So expectations are high. We got 30, 45 more seconds here talking about K-State baseball. The Batcats dropped 2 of 3 this weekend, but it's been an exciting spring.
It's been a great spring. I think the expectations for K-State to make their first NCAA regional since 2013 should still be there. It's crazy when you think about that. They got TCU coming in next weekend. If they win that series, I think they'll cement their spot in the regionals. We'll see what happens, but it's been a fun spring. It's been a fun year for K-State, and couldn't be more blessed to cover it.
They're firing on all cylinders. All right, check out the podcast Fighting Ever Fighting on Spotify, Apple Music. wherever you get your podcasts.
All right.
Thanks
so
guys.
much, Cole, and we'll be right back with more K Nation.